Okay, guys, here's that completed graph from the previous question. So take a moment, pause the video, make sure you get all the points that you need on your graph since you ran out of time on that last video. Okay, moving on. Next page, it's important to understand that the value of A can be either positive or negative, but the absolute value of A is what we consider to be the amplitude. So I think of amplitude as that distance between the midline and the maximum value. We usually consider that positive distance. A negative in front of A, that tells us to do something with our graph. So please take a moment, complete the entirety of this page. And then when you unpause this video, so pause the video and then unpause it once you're done with this page, you can check your work. So here are the answers. These should have been your graphs for the first two problems. Hopefully you made a conclusion that said something like, oh, hey, look, the second graph is flipped over. The first one we had a W for a Wumbo. I think that's a SpongeBob reference. I don't know. I wasn't allowed to watch it as a kid. And then the 2 is an M for Mr. Like Mr. Ferris. This is what happens when you don't have a class to talk to, guys. You just start to become delusional. Last one. Here are the answers. And again, if you notice, this graph is just flipped over. So hopefully that went pretty well. Again, if you need to pause it at any point to check your work, feel free to do so. Let's go to the last page here. Final page. So now what I want you to see is that when that number A is negative, we just take the graph and flip it over whatever the midline was. So this is a little more complicated because our midline is a little different. So here our midline is -1. Oh, that's not the right spot. Here's our midline of -1. Now we know we are going to have a period of pi. E equals 2 pi over b, 2 pi over 2. Pi is our period. That means pi over 4 is going to be however many units we have. So that actually is going to fall right in between here. So we're going to have points at every one of these little tick marks. Now, typically, sine would start in the midline. Sine still does start in the midline. But normal sine, without this negative here, would increase first. Now it's just switched. Everything's opposite. Instead of increasing here, sine is going to decrease. So sine is going to decrease to right here. And then it comes back up and increases there. And what happens is we get the result of a sine curve that is basically upside down. Decrease again. And then we're going to increase. And that first point I just put on there, I have that a little bit off. That should have been a little nicer. And there's a negative sine curve. So this first point, I apologize, that should be falling right more like right here. And then kind of coming up like that. So this one over here, period. P is going to equal 2 pi over 1/2 equals 4 pi. So our intervals are going to go by pi. 4 pi over 4 is pi. That's what we're dealing with. Our midline is 3. And now cosine would typically start at its maximum value, but since it is negative, we're going to do the opposite. Instead of starting at the maximum value, we're going to start at the minimum. And now we have to pay attention. Oh, hey, the minimum value is going to be 3 below the midline. So that's going to be down here. And then it's going to return to 0 by, the next point is going to be at pi. That's what we got from this thing. Next point is going to be at its maximum instead of being at its minimum, because it's negative, at 6 pi. Come back down to 0. And finally, get out of here. No, leave me alone. Oh my gosh. Come back down to 4 pi. There we go. Draw our curve. I wish it didn't give me that warning that would pop up and take up half my screen when I do these videos, but alas. There is our -3 cosine of 1/2 x plus 3 curve. Next video will be very short, just covering that very last question.